How do you know that you're a good teacher? I mean, you get evaluations from your principal, you get feedback from curriculum coaches, you are generally able to self-reflect on your own learning, but sometimes for certain teachers, especially the ones who are perfectionists, this question can be absolutely nagging. How do you know that you're doing a good job? And I would argue that one of the best solutions to that is to do student surveys. And I mention this because students are the ones who are in your classroom all the time. And when you get student surveys, what you get is an honest snapshot of how you're actually doing in the classroom. And if you're willing to look at the student surveys honestly, you can look at trends and see areas that you want to improve. And you can look at areas where you're doing a good job. And the question begins to evolve and change. It's no longer, am I a good teacher or am I doing a good job? But it's simply, what's working, what's not working, and what do I want to do next? And it's great feedback to help you figure out what your blind spots are. I remember I started doing teacher surveys probably toward the end of my first year of teaching. I had this team leader, Nancy, and she gave me an example one that she had students do. And I was terrified to give it to my students at the end of the year. I was worried that they would slam me for being the horrible first year teacher, not knowing what he's doing fraud that I thought that I was. But to my surprise, they still told me things that were failing, things that I needed to work on. But what shocked me was how many of them said things that I didn't expect. Things like, I loved going to your class every day, or remember when we did this cool project, or I always felt like you cared about the students. And that was the feedback that I needed. That was the affirmation and encouragement. But on top of that, I got feedback in areas that I didn't know about. Things like the pacing of my class, which I thought was a good thing that it was moving so quickly, but students complained that we were doing so much so fast that they never had, quote, time to think. And I realized that I didn't do enough for metacognition. There were all these little hidden areas that I hadn't thought about that turned out to be really important from that feedback. But there was also this whole set of positive aspects that I hadn't considered. Things that when I read them, I was blown away. The bottom line is we will always be flawed as teachers. But there are really good things that we all do as a result. And when you do student surveys, you get a chance to see what worked and what didn't work. These surveys went from something that I gave out at the very end of the quarter to something that honestly I started doing all the time. Every single quarter. And then I began to create a shorter version of this survey that I would pass out to about 3 to 5 students every single day. And the crazy thing there is I started getting constant data on what the students thought of the class. And that was incredibly valuable. I would argue that when you do student surveys, you are creating a system that is human-driven and empathy-driven. And that's a powerful thing.